Peggy Schlechter, a Community Vitality Field Specialist with SDSU Extension, and your host for this workshop on weathering the storm for small business. We want to welcome all of our small business owners and those of you who help support small businesses in South Dakota. You are all very, very important. As small business owners, I'm sure there are many times, especially right now, where you feel like you are out there on your own, but you are not alone. And you are so very important to the economy of South Dakota and of our country. In fact, collectively, small businesses account for 99.7% of all employers in the country. And small businesses employ over 56 million people in the United States. And according to the Small Business Administration, that's equal to 57% of the private sector employees in the nation. And that's not all. As you know, your small business is a gathering place for many people in the community. Small businesses are rooted in the landscape where they grow. Your business fosters local economies, keeps money close to home, and supports neighborhoods and communities. Our locally owned businesses reflect culture and needs of their communities. So just a reminder how very, very important you are to all of us. We're excited to have several people join us for this workshop. Lorna Sabo Wundehead, Rural Behavioral Health Team Member and SDSU Extension Family Resource Management Specialist. Krista Ehlert, Rural Behavioral Health Team Member and Assistant Professor and SDSU Extension Range Specialist. And Joe Fiala, Development Director, South Dakota Governor's Office of Economic Development. So I'm going to take some time to just turn it over to Lorna now, and she's going to visit with you a little bit about stress.
Thank you, Peggy, and welcome everyone to our webinar. Before I get started with my information, I just want to make sure that we give Michigan Cooperative Extension recognition for this program. We have adapted their Weathering the Storm for farmers and ranchers to make it applicable to individuals who have small businesses. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about stress. And as during this time and any time that we experience stress, it's important for us to remember that we all learn how to manage our stress levels and to be able to reduce the effects of unwanted stress. Too much stress can impact our health and it can impact the work that we do. So first of all, how is stress defined? Stress is defined as a need or demand that people confront that is perceived as burdensome or threatening and then can lead to physical and mental health problems. Not all stress is bad. When we are excited about something such as a wedding or a birth of a baby or even a holiday, we can feel that anticipation. This helps us to get mentally and physically ready for the event. And this type of stress is called eustress. And it energizes us. And it's really what keeps us going during those busy times with our businesses or whatever our work entails. However, when we suffer from too much stress, and particularly if it is over a long period of time, this is called distress. Prolonged stress can then result in severe physical problems, emotional problems, or even both. So as we think about stress, we want to start thinking about what are some signs of stress. Thinking about signs of stress that we ourselves are experiencing, but also signs of stress that maybe our family members or the individuals that we're working with are experiencing. Because once you begin to recognize your own stress signals, then you can begin to develop some skills in order to help handle the stress. You may find it easier to recognize signs of stress in other people, and then you can watch for these signs in your own family or friends and acquaintances, and if you see them on a day-to-day basis. So signs of stress show up in your body, your mind, and in your actions. Signs of stress that appear in the body can include things like headache, stomach ache, backache, high blood pressure, high blood sugar, or a racing heart or feelings of nausea. In addition to signs of stress related to the body, there are signs of stress that can happen in your mind or mental. And these can be feelings of feeling anxious, feeling angry or sad, maybe bitter, feeling depressed, or even feeling hopeless. And then actions that show signs of stress in you and others include not being able to sleep or sleeping too much, not feeling like eating or overeating. Maybe there's an increased use in cigarettes, drugs, or alcohol. Maybe you start throwing things or breaking things, or you're yelling and screaming, or you might just be withdrawing from your friends and your family. So all of these signs of stress, we have to remember that there is a root cause of the stress. Many times that root cause of stress is something that we have no control over. So right now we're all experiencing effects of the coronavirus and the health crisis that it's causing, but we have no control over the number of interaction with individuals, whether or not our businesses can open, what we can do within our business, how long this is going to last. We have no control over that. So what we have to start thinking about is what we do have control over, because that is where we can make a difference and start doing some problem solving. So by recognizing what the root cause is, and that can help us figure out like what we can control and some actions that we can take. So in thinking about stress and kind of thinking about where we have some control and where we can feel where we can get a sense of control, I'm going to give you a little biology lesson. So cortisol is known as a stress hormone that is released in our brains in times of fear and stress. Cortisol increases the glucose or the sugars in the bloodstream, and in some cases it can motivate us to act. However, when the cortisol levels remain elevated, perhaps due to that chronic stress, this can have some detrimental impacts on our health. Cortisol alters our immune system, it suppresses our digestion, it can even suppress some growth processes. Cortisol changes our moods, it can cause us to have fears, and it will change our motivation. So health problems associated with high cortisol levels include heart disease, lowered immune system, digestive problems, sleep problems, issues with memory and concentration, weight gain, anxiety, and depression. So to get a visual picture of what cortisol looks like, I have a glass of water, and you can see, well, you can kind of see through this glass of water because you can see my fingers moving behind it. So this is what your brain looks like when you are thinking clearly. However, when you get stress and that cortisol is activated and you're maybe feeling angry or scared, that's where your brain is flooded with that cortisol. So picture my glass of water with, now we have the cortisol that's been activated in that glass of water, and you can't see through it. So this is just an illustration of why it's really hard to even just think clearly sometimes when you're stressed, why it's difficult to make rational decisions, why it's maybe difficult for us to react appropriately to other people, is because of that natural development and production of that cortisol in our body that's related to that stress. So what we need to do then is to figure out what are some coping strategies. Once we have recognized our signs of stress and when we're starting to feel stress, figure out what to do. So just a few suggestions, and this is just a very tiny list of things that you can do, is kind of related to your physical health. You can maybe exercise or make sure that you're eating healthy, like choose fruits and vegetables rather than choosing chips and ice cream. Mentally, for our mental health, we can maybe look at journaling or working on a hobby or even listening to music. For our emotional health, we can think about doing something for somebody, or maybe even just spending time with a family member, going for a walk, or just having a conversation about how things are going. Personally, maybe we take time for ourselves. If you have a pet, take your dog for a walk, or just doing something that you love to be able to do, that you don't feel like you have time to be able to do that. And then work related, making sure that you're taking some breaks and really focusing on things that you can control. One of my favorite strategies from my list of strategies is organizing your space, because that really helps me to reduce stress when my space is really organized. So think about the coping strategies as tools, and think about them being available in your toolbox. Often we don't have the tools that would be most useful for our current situation, so we may need some help in getting those tools from somebody else. We may need to learn how to use the new tools and have them so that they work better in terms of our problem solving. And if one way a person handles stress is to overeat or to self-medicate with alcohol and cigarettes, these are tools or strategies, but they're not the healthiest options. So you want to be able to think about things that are going to be healthy for you and will continue to help you to reduce that stress. So as we're thinking about our stress and being able to recognize those signs and symptoms, we have to think about ways to determine strategies in order for us to be able to deal with that, and to think about different ways in order for us to be able to manage our stress. So Krista is going to talk about some different strategies that you can implement that are really quick and easy for you to do.
Thanks, Lorna. So again, I'm Krista Ehlert. I'm with SDSU Extension, and I'm also part of the Rural Behavioral Health team, as is Lorna. So these are just a few simple, easy strategies to think about implementing into kind of your everyday life to help you cope with the sort of multitude of stresses that are happening right now due to the current COVID situation, but also once we get through all this, these are going to be equally as effective. So the first strategy is to use self-talk, and the main reason behind this strategy is there's this quote that says, "Be careful how you are talking to yourself because you are the one that's listening." So that means that we can talk to ourselves using positive words and phrases, and those positive words and phrases can therefore influence how we feel and also how we go about managing our stress. So how do you respond to your own thoughts? Do you struggle to control those thoughts, feelings, or body sensations? Think about when you've been in a situation that's been extremely stressful. Do you get mad or feel sad? Do you get so busy that you don't even realize that you haven't eaten lunch yet? I know that that personally happens to me quite a lot. Or do you blame yourself for thinking or feeling that way? So if you, as I was kind of listing those questions, if you thought yes to any of those, then that's where it kind of crosses into potentially becoming problematic. So think about how you typically have responded to those stressful situations before. Lorna brought up that some people overeat, or you don't eat enough. You can over-exercise, not exercise enough. It's kind of often comes in these sort of different extreme scenarios. So we're often really hard on ourselves and feel like we're a failure when we can't control our thoughts or emotions. But the truth is that it's really difficult. And so one exercise to kind of work through this then is to pick 3 words. Again, the body hears what the mind thinks, so choose your thoughts with purpose. Tell yourself that you're able to overcome any challenge. What you can do as you're listening to this or later on when you have a spare moment to yourself is you can either take an index card, those 3x5 note cards, or scrap of paper, post-it note, whatever it is, and pick a negative thought that you typically have and work to change it into a positive thought. And you can write that positive thought on that piece of paper. And then at the same time, pick 3 words that you will use to keep the right mindset and write those on an index card. So I have an experience where I was at a work conference. I work with ranchers as the range specialist, and this producer was talking about how he used to always worked cattle with his younger daughter. She was about 12. She loved going out with him, but he often lost his temper. And so it got to the point where when he would ask if she wanted to go, she wouldn't want to. So for him, 3 words that he might use would be like calm, controlled, compassionate. So think of what you want to be in those moments. As a small business owner, producers are also kind of small business owners. But if you think about what it's like to, receive the news that your distributor is no longer going to be shipping out for whatever reason, maybe it's due to what's going on with COVID, think about how you want to respond to that news, but also how you will share that news when you express it to your customers and maybe your employees. So self-talk is one of the strategies. The second strategy is using your breath. And I know that this always sounds a lot, it sounds a lot easier than it is to think about, because I feel in a way that it's often, when someone tells you to just breathe through your stress, it seems silly and benign, and there's no way that's going to work. From experience, it does work. You just have to give it some time. So this is the second strategy. Lorna presented that really nice graphic of her kitchen jars, her mason jars filled with clear water, and then she had dirt in one of the other ones, or soil as we like to call it. And so what happens when you do these deep breathing exercises is that you start to uncloud that dark jar, and it starts to become more see-through. And that effectively is what you're doing with your deep breathing, is that it takes those cortisol levels down to where your mind can actually logically think through and process what you're feeling. So this is just one way to practice deep breathing. There's also other techniques that you can easily look up, but this first option is called box breathing. So you can think about drawing out a box as you do this. I will do an abbreviated version, otherwise I might pass out. But so you will first inhale for 4 seconds. 1, 2, 3, 4. Hold for 4 seconds. Exhale for 4 seconds. And then you keep exhaling until you feel like you have no breath left for that last 4 seconds to complete your box. And if you do that several times, you will notice that your body starts to relax. The other benefit about deep breathing is that it's something that you can do and no one needs to realize that you're doing it or that you're working through some stress or anxiety. So it's really beneficial that way. You can do it wherever you are and with whoever you are. So that is a second technique to think about incorporating into your everyday strategies. The last strategy is using acceptance. I know that growing up, this was something my dad always kind of decided to tell us about when we were struggling with things. There's this quote, if you don't like something, change it. If you can't change it, change the way you think about it. So you can choose to change your attitude and you can change how you handle the situation that's in front of you. One way to kind of think about this exercise and how we facilitate this in person, but you can easily do as you're listening to this or later, is take a piece of paper, but think about when you kind of run into friends or acquaintances and they always ask, how are you doing? What's going on? And oftentimes our response is, I have a lot on my plate. I'm so busy. I'm so stressed. Well, on this imaginary paper plate, or grab one from your kitchen, write down all of your stressors. You can use sentences, words, pictures, stick figures, whatever it is. And then once you've done that, circle all of the things that you have no control over and think about what you notice. So oftentimes, again, when we do this in person, is that people will just hold up their whole plate and say that they circled their entire plate. You don't have control over the weather, you don't have control over a virus, you don't have control over government regulations or any of the programs that are coming out to help small businesses. So you do have control over, again, your mindset and accepting self-talk, positive self-talk, and using deep breathing and starting to think about ways to problem solve and what strategies you need to keep your small business and your employees and yourself successful and functioning through this time. And with that, I will be passing it back over to Lorna.
All right, so you've heard from us ways to recognize some signs and symptoms of stress and learned about some different strategies. Most importantly, you have to think of what works best for you. So there's a lot of different things that you can do in order to help deal with your stress, but you might have to try a few different things in order to, hit on exactly what works best. So cultivating a productive mindset when it comes to dealing with stress can be done with the help of a personal action plan. The action plan can help us identify how we plan to deal with the stress by listing specific steps or tasks that will help ourselves and those that we care about. It's really important to make sure that you keep your action plan in a place where you'll be able to see it to help remind you of your efforts. So there's 3 simple steps as a part of this action plan. The first is to recognize the symptoms of stress. And so make a list of the symptoms that you are experiencing. Remember that there are symptoms that are physical, mental, and then symptoms that are action. Then step 2 is to identify some self-care practices to feel better. So thinking about the breathing exercises that Krista talked about, writing those 3 words on a note card, using positive self-talk, or even like just taking a break, getting out of the house, moving to a different room, whatever it is that you have to do. So identify a few different strategies that might work in different scenarios. And then the third step is to identify community resources that you can use. So thinking in terms of what is available in your immediate community. Is there a medical or counselor that you can go visit with? Is there someone from a faith-based organization that you could go talk to? Or even just a trusted friend who will help you just be able to talk about what you're feeling and be able to help you through that situation. So our 3 steps are to recognize the symptoms that you're feeling, identify some self-care practices, and then to identify community resources that you can use. And always remember to be able to write those down. And Krista is going to give you a few more resources that are available to you.
Thanks again, Lorna. So we recognize that stress is high. You might be feeling anxious or depressed during this time. There are several resources that are available. The first is the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline. That number is 1-800-273-TALK, or it's 1-800-273-8255. That is the TALK part of it spelled out. It's a very useful resource. It's a national number that reroutes calls to regional call centers. All of the responders have been trained in how to talk with people experiencing distress and people who might be having thoughts about suicide. And they're there to make suggestions about what to do to get help. And even if you think that you personally might not need this number, it's always good and beneficial to have it on hand. One thing that you can do is add it as a contact in your phone. And if you put a punctuation mark at the beginning of the first name of that contact, it shows up at the very beginning of your contacts list. So you don't have to wait precious moments trying to search for it. Of course, 911 is also a resource when you or a person you care about is experiencing high levels of stress where suicide is a risk and concern. Excuse me. In addition, there are other resources that are available through SDSU Extension. If you go to extension.sdstate.edu On the very front page, sort of on the left-hand side, we have a COVID-19 resource page, and we have things broken out there into food and families, finance concerns, health and wellness, nutrition, parents and youth, because you might not only be a small business owner, you might also have young people that typically are outside of your care during the day, and you might also have older kids who are being homeschooled by you all of a sudden. So trying to incorporate all of that and managing those different stress levels from different hats. There are lots of really good resources available on the Extension website. And with that, I will turn it over to Joe.
Okay. Thanks. That was great information, Lorna and Krista. My name is Joe Fiala. I'm with the Governor's Office of Economic Development, and I'm our Development Director. And so I have a number of specific resources for small business owners, and that includes producers and ranchers and farmers. They can all access some of those programs and certainly the information that we have available. And so I'm going to attempt to share my screen. We'll see how this goes. Okay, I got to find the right one. There we go. And share. And I think I've got it. All right. So this is the Governor's Office of Economic Development. This is our homepage. It's sdgoed.com. That just changed. We just got a new URL. And so that's our address there. I'm going to show you a page that we've created specifically for COVID-19. And so you just click over here in the corner here where it says COVID-19, just learn more. And that's going to bring up our COVID-19 webpage. And on here, I'm going to scroll down slowly. We have a lot of various links to programs and information that you can access at any time. I'm going to go through just a handful of these and then highlight some additional websites as well. So the first one I want to talk about is Governor Noem's Small Business Relief Fund. This is a loan program for small businesses, less than 250 employees, obviously a South Dakota business, and you had to be established prior to March of 2020. So you had to be kind of a going concern before March 2020. And there's a lot of information here. I'm just going to touch on a couple of things. First and foremost, it's a loan to help businesses that have been impacted by COVID-19. It can be a loan of up to $75,000 to help with working capital, essentially. And it can be in increments of 5,000 though. So it can be as small as 5,000 all the way up to 75,000. And you can apply right here using this webpage. The loan application is here at the bottom. And you can also sign up for our COVID-19 email updates right here. I thought I would just mention that. Now I'm gonna page back up and highlight a couple of additional programs for you. Like I said, there's a lot of information and links here, so please do take the time to look through that and see what's applicable to your specific business scenario. But the one I want to point out is the Small Business Administration has a loan program that is the Economic Injury Disaster Loan Fund. That came out probably 3 weeks ago. And then the Paycheck Protection Program is another program from the SBA that specifically relates to a loan to help pay your employees and help you keep them on your payroll. And some of that actually can turn into a grant. And so it starts out as a loan, but some of it can be forgiven and turn into a grant. Both of those programs as of today have been tapped out. But we anticipate that the federal government may provide some additional funding in those programs. So please check back on those programs to see if there's been additional funding that's come from the federal government. Okay, I'm gonna leave our website here and touch on a couple of others. I'll click on this tab up here. Our sister agency over at the Department of Labor and Regulation has a COVID-19 web page as well. And their website is dlr.sd.gov. And then you can find their COVID-19 web page from their homepage. This would be the place you would go to find out about unemployment assistance, or what they call re-employment assistance now. They also just recently started another program for, I think it's called Pandemic Unemployment Assistance. And that really is for some of the small businesses that didn't qualify for some of the other programs. So if you're an independent contractor or just a small, super small business owner, or maybe you participate in the gig economy, that program may be for you and help you out. Of course, SDSU Extension has a COVID-19 webpage that was discussed earlier. That's at extension.sdstate.edu. And they've got a number of resources available related to this COVID-19 situation that we're in, but specifically geared more towards the ag economy. And so there's a lot of good resources out on this webpage that I wanted to highlight for you. Now, if you're a small business owner and you're having to provide information to apply for these programs, and maybe don't understand some of the business terms that are being used, USD has started a series of webinars, and they're free, to kind of go through real basic business information, but also things like managing stress and cash flow and building your brand during COVID-19. And you can see all of them here. So you can certainly utilize those resources on the web as well. And that's at usd.edu and /business/COVID-19-business-support. That's a long one. But great information there. The last kind of page I wanted to highlight for you is you probably have a local economic development office right in your area. And I would encourage you to reach out to that office and have some discussions, whether you're a producer, farmer, rancher, small business owner, or any mix of those. Your local economic development office can lend a hand, and we partner very closely with these local economic development offices. So I'm back at the Governor's Office of Economic Development website, sdgoed.com, and we have a page that lists these local EDOs, Economic Development Organizations. I'll show you how to get there. That's an easy way to do it. You go all the way to the bottom of any page on our website, and you click the View Site Map. And then once you do that, you get all of our website right here at the bottom. And it's over here on the right, local EDO offices right there. And that local EDO office is going to be one person that can be on your team to show you that you're not alone in this thing. They can work with you, try to help answer your questions, as can our team at the Governor's Office of Economic Development. And you can find our contact information on our website. And if nothing else, here is our phone number, 605-773-4633. Or you can certainly click our Contact Us link here. So we'll be on your team, on your business team, but a couple of others folks I wanted to highlight is your tax professional or accountant or bookkeeper, and your attorney. Those are folks that you have probably worked with throughout your career, and they're great resources and great team members to have on your team. So that's just a number of highlights of information and programs from the Governor's Office of Economic Development, and kind of the hub of that whole thing is our COVID-19 webpage. All right, so with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Peggy and see if I can't unshare my page here. There we go.
Sounds good. Thank you, Joe. Thanks for sharing all those pages. I think it's a lot easier when we've actually seen those web pages to go and know what we're looking for. And so hopefully that makes it a lot easier for everybody that watches this workshop to find some of those resources. We just all want to encourage you to remember to practice those stress management strategies. Remember when Lorna visited a little bit earlier, she talked about what too much stress can do, and it can lower our immunity. It can increase our blood pressure. We can have digestive problems. We can have ulcers, heart attacks. Of course, all those things just add more distress to us. And so if we can manage our stress levels before we end up getting more stress, that is much, much better. And then Krista talked about some strategies, and she was talking about some strategies that included two of the three strategies she talked about included self-talk, managing that self-talk, and then also acceptance. And it reminded me of a webinar I had participated in where a speaker had said that the times of the greatest challenge and change were often the times of the greatest innovation. So talk about looking at things differently. That would be an example of that. And so it reminded me of a workshop I had attended that was presented by DeWitt Jones. And DeWitt Jones is a freelance photographer. And he said that it was very important that we keep our eyes open for possibilities. And he talks about at a time he was just totally ready to give up. And inside himself, a voice said, "Come on, DeWitt, what's here? I know this isn't how you planned it, but what are the possibilities?" And so he felt that he needed to connect with that positive vision and believe that solutions do exist. He began to view change as possibility and said that times of change hold the most potential. He needed to learn to live with certainty, yet act with confidence. And so I really feel like that's a good example of the acceptance and figuring out how can I use this time to really be innovative, because it is certainly not how any of us planned it, but we will survive it. So thank you for joining us today. We really appreciate you watching this webinar. It will be on our website, so if it helped you at all, please let some of your coworkers, your fellow business owners and family members know about it. And don't hesitate to reach out to any of us if you think we can be of any assistance. We're all in this together, and we need to support each other as much as possible. Thank you again.